Okay, welcome back, and we are continuing our video discussions on articles, and we are continuing our discussion specifically on indefinite articles. Indefinite, okay, means articles are nouns that are not defined. Okay, we're using the articles a, and, or in the plural some. Okay, so these are the ones that we're talking about, and we're going to talk about when you can use a noun without an article in front of it. And an article is, like the, or a, or an, or some. And usually when we say a noun or have a noun, we always have an article in front of it. But there are situations in English when we don't do that. And these situations are when we make generalizations or general statements, like all-encompassing statements about something. And I'm just going to walk you through a couple of examples. I would encourage you to please read this section because I'm just going to pull out some important information for you. But to fully understand it, you're probably going to want to read it either before or after, or before and after I give this little tiny lecture here. Okay, so always remember that the video is to help you understand the reading. It is not to take the place of the reading. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the first generalization. It says birds start migrating north early in the spring. All right, so we can see that there is no the or a or and in front of it. It's just a general statement about all birds. I don't have any specific birds in mind. Birds start migrating north early in the spring. We're going to compare that with a different thing. It says some birds have nested in our oak trees. When I will use the word some, I actually have a specific group in mind. Now, not necessarily a defined group. It's not a defined group. It's still, and you still use the indefinite article because I don't know exactly which birds. I just know that some have. All right, so this is different. Using some birds have nested in our trees, I'm obviously referring to a part of, or not all birds, just some birds. I don't know if that makes sense. But this is all birds. Okay, so I don't use any article in front of it. And when I put the word some in front of it, obviously I'm only referring to a small set of birds. Okay? It says, and then you can read that to get that example, to understand that example right there. I'm going to move on. And then there's another situation down here. And we're going to give you an example. It says, airplanes have totally changed the way we travel. The airplanes that you see were all made by Boeing. In the first statement, right here, this is a general statement. Airplanes have totally changed the way we travel. And down here, we have a specific set of airplanes in mind. The airplanes that you see were all made by Boeing. So anytime you have a specific, anytime you're talking about a subset of a noun, whether it's defined or undefined, you always use an article in front of it. But if you're talking about all airplanes, like broad sweeping generalities, then you don't use a article in front of the noun. All right? Let's go ahead and take a look, and this is true for, we're going to talk about, you can read this, but I'm going to point out when you can tell a generalization is being made, and I encourage you to read this section right there that I just highlighted for you. And then we're going to go on, and I'm going to point out some of these situations for you. Usually when a generalization is being made where you don't need an article, it's usually in one of three tenses. It's in the present tense, the present progressive tense, or the present perfect tense. And I know we haven't gone over tenses yet, so I don't want this to confuse you too much, but the present tense means it's happening, it's happening in the present. It doesn't mean right now. It just means it's a continuous state. Okay, airports seem impossibly crowded these days. That's the present tense. The present progressive is actually easy to identify because you're always going to use a linking verb is or are, and you're always going to have an ing on the ending. Okay, it's usually going to be combined with a linking verb, is or are or were, or past tense or was, and then you're going to have the linking verb with the ing. In this situation is getting, are getting, okay, are getting. And so that's present progressive, and we're going to get into verb forms later, so I don't want you to get hung up on that. But obviously you can see that we don't need to use the in here because it's talking about all airports. Airports are getting more crowded every day. And the last one is the present perfect. This is a little harder, and once again, I don't want you to get too caught up on tenses yet because we haven't really covered them. But I do want you to try to identify them in these three. Airports have become. Anytime you have a present perfect, you're always going to use have or has, okay, and then the verb, okay, and that's the present perfect. The present form of have or has, and of course then the verb. That's a little confusing, and like I said, don't get too hung up on this, but I do want to expose you to it so you have an idea of what's going on. And then of course the non-count noun, same way. Flying is more difficult every day. Flying is getting more difficult every day. Is the present, is getting is the present progressive, and has become, remember, has the has in there, is the present perfect. And this means that all these things right here are generalities, okay? Now you notice that the word flying in this situation is actually being used as a noun. We're going to get into gerunds a little bit later. It looks like a verb until you try to change the tense, and then you realize that you can't, so it's actually the noun. Don't get too caught up on that either, because we're going to look at that later in more depth, okay? So, and what's another way you can understand? Another way you know that generalizations are being made is because you use adverbs of frequency, and these are like always, often, generally, frequently, usually, never. Okay, anytime you say something using those words, it's a generality, and I'll show you some examples here. Rainstorms always come in. Sweet apples never. Dogs usually. American television programs often. So anytime we're talking about telling when something happens or how something happens like that, how often something happens, it's always a general statement, and it's that's then you don't use an article in front of it, okay? Conflict always has the potential to get out of hand, okay? So those are just some ideas, and you can look through those and see, and those aren't all that difficult to figure out, and they're in italics, you can see. Okay, so what you're going to do in this exercise right here is, and I do want you to work together on this because this isn't overly important, but I do want you to be able to understand it, and so I want you to work together and try to work through these examples and see if you can complete them accurately, okay? It says, use the appropriate article in the blank spaces in the following sentences. If the sentence is making a generalization, put a 0 in the blank space to show that no article is used, okay? And it says, olives are usually, they use the word usually, so I know that it's talking about olives in general, so I don't have to use any article there, okay? It's talking about all olives, okay? It says, Western movies have horse chases rather than car chases. Once again, have, and then they use the word, then they use a verb. Have, and then the verb. It's separated by but that's okay. So I wouldn't use any article in front of that, so I just put a 0 there, saying that I don't need an article, okay? So let's take a look at the next one, and then I'm going to have you do a few on your own. It says, all too often, blank politicians just tell people what they want to hear. Once again, too often, that tells how often, or it gives a general statement about politicians, so I'm not going to use any article there. It says, we are waiting until we get back all replies to our request. we are waiting until we get back all the replies to our request. Yeah, we'll probably use the there. Okay. Good. There's no adverb there. You know, that's a tough one. I probably, if I'm using the rules that I just told you about, it's in the present progressive right here. So I probably wouldn't use any article there. You could use an article, but you don't have to. And so if I'm using the rules that I just told you, it's in the present progressive, so I would just use it as a general statement. We're waiting until we get back all replies to our requests, okay? We only order blank supplies when we run out. We only order, so this tells how often, only. So it's an adverb telling how often, so I wouldn't use any article there either. Blank trucks are never allowed in the left lane. Never. It's an adverb, so trucks in general, I wouldn't put anything there, okay? So go ahead and work through these. I'm not saying all of them are no article in front, but go ahead and take a look and see how you do. We'll do one more together. It says, we are required to have 1,000 units of blood on hand at all times. Well, at all times, it says how often. So once again, I wouldn't use any article in front of there. So I'd put another 0 there, okay? Well, hopefully that helps you out. And if you're confused on this, we're going to go over it in class as well. But like I said, collaborate with each other and figure out, try to figure out the answers and ask your questions in class. Good luck, and I'll see you in the next video.